And welcome to Straight Up. I am your host, Marc Patrone. I appreciate you tuning in. Shaking up the Liberal government. Prime Minister Mark Carney could be ready to, launch a major shakeup of his cabinet. That, according to an exclusive in the Toronto Sun. The moves could mean dropping some of the mainstays from the Trudeau-era and elevating others. In his column, Brian Lilley writes as follows. This is all part of a plan to shed Trudeau-era deadwood and have Carney attract new faces and new talent to try and put his own stamp on the Liberal Party. Now, one key departure is expected to be that of Melanie Joly, the current Industry Minister. This headline, Melanie Joly eyes Paris ambassador role as Carney plans major cabinet overhaul. Now, Joly has been a close personal friend of Justin Trudeau's for 2 decades. When she ran for the leadership of the Liberal Party, she carried the flag for the Trudeau wing, pushing for a continuation of his policies. Is her departure, impending departure, a sign that Carney is purging the cabinet of Trudeau loyalists? Well, others could follow Joly out the door. Brian Lilley writes, there could be political risks to that. He will be joining us to talk about that story minutes from now. After Carney dismissed a question by a reporter this week about whether he'd spoken to President Trump, we learn the PM may be soon traveling to Washington, D.C. next week. CBC is reporting that Carney may attend the draw for the FIFA World Cup, in which Canada, the United States, and Mexico are jointly hosting next year. Now, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre ripped Carney after the PM flippantly said, "Who cares?" in response to the question of whether he'd spoken to Trump.
Since he took office, not only has he failed to get the promised deal, but American tariffs on aluminum, autos, and steel have doubled. On forestry communities, they have tripled. The Prime Minister says, who cares? All of us on this side of the House care about the communities that are being emptied out in our forestry, the steel workers in Hamilton who don't have jobs to pay their mortgages. We care about those people. Why doesn't he?
Well, for all the talk of an imminent pipeline announcement, BC Premier David Eby says he doesn't feel threatened by that. Eby, a hardline opponent to the proposed pipeline, says there's no point being threatened by a project that doesn't exist. Let's listen.
Not threatened by a project that doesn't actually exist. The entire proposal from Premier Smith is a communications exercise. There is no company, there's no money, there's no route, there's no nothing. And so, I try to keep that front of mind as I wrestle with the fact that the entire country seems to be particularly interested in this non-existent project when British Columbia is delivering tens of billions of dollars in real projects, thousands and thousands of jobs, billions of dollars of revenue that will flow to federal and provincial coffers if we can close these deals, which are approaching final investment decision in the next 12 months.
It's been widely reported that Prime Minister Carney and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith will soon be announcing a deal that includes a pipeline this week. And I'm now joined by Brian Lilley, columnist with the Toronto Sun. And he's got this exclusive headline, Melanie Joly eyes Paris ambassador role as Carney plans major cabinet overhaul. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thanks for having me. Wouldn't you love to go live in Paris at the Canadian Embassy, Mark? I mean, it's in the 8th arrondissement. It's a historic Hotel de Brigny. You're down the street from Emmanuel Macron's presidential palace. You get invites to all the best parties, all the best shoppings. Like, this is what you want, right? This is what you want as your reward for being a loyal Liberal soldier.
Except it may not be entirely a reward. I mean, if I read your column correctly, Carney's looking to make some changes, and she's one of the changes that he wants to make. Isn't that so?
Yeah, so it appears to me that there's a bit of give and take here. So Carney definitely wants to make changes. He wants to put his own stamp on the Liberal Party. Of course, we saw during the Justin Trudeau era that Trudeau tried to take the Liberal Party to the left of the NDP. He followed the Kathleen Wynne plan. No surprise. Many of the people around Trudeau when he took office, when he became leader, were former Queen's Park people who had been around Kathleen Wynne. I call them the Gerard Kennedy wing of the Liberal Party. Kennedy was a politician at various levels of government. He tried to run for the leadership of the Liberal Party, was unsuccessful. But all the people around him went on to great things in the PMO, or to become cabinet ministers like Marianne, or become prime minister like Justin Trudeau. And they very much wanted a very left-wing Liberal Party. So that's what they did. Mark Carney, I'm not one of these people that says, oh, it's really a conservative government, or Mark Carney's a conservative. I don't buy that. He's still very much a Liberal, but he's not a New Democrat pretending to be a Liberal. And that's kind of the difference right now. So Carney's trying to put his own stamp. He's trying to shift the party closer to the center. I'm not going to say the center, but closer to it. And so he wants to get rid of Trudeau-era deadwood, and in areas where he can put in, potentially star candidates, whether it's Chrystia Freeland in Toronto with University Rosedale, or with Scarborough-Guildwood, where Bill Blair, the former public safety minister and Toronto police chief, is, North Vancouver, where Jonathan Wilkinson is, and now we're hearing Melanie Joly in Ahuntsic-Cartierville, that's the north end of Montreal. Fairly safe Liberal seats, not all of them, especially North Vancouver and Scarborough. Those could potentially, if the Conservatives play it right, go blue, but fairly safe Liberal seats. And so if he gets rid of these people, then he can bring in his own candidates. So he wants to move these folks out. Joly says, okay, but if I'm going, I want something. I want to go to Paris. I want to be the ambassador to France. What's funny is that the current ambassador to France is a guy named Stéphane Dion. Maybe you remember him as leader of the Liberal Party more than a decade ago. Justin Trudeau's early on foreign affairs minister. Why is he the ambassador to Paris, to France and Paris? Because Trudeau wanted rid of him in 2017 and shipped him off to Europe to get rid of him and allow other people to run. He was originally the ambassador to Germany and a special representative to the EU. Then in 2022 became ambassador to France. So, this is becoming a Liberal rite of passage, I guess. When we're done with you, we'll ship you off somewhere. I think that the big diplomatic appointments in Paris, in Washington, in London should be political people, not diplomats. But is Melanie Joly the right one? I don't know. She hasn't been very good at any of her portfolios yet.
Yeah, I mean, is this due to changes in the energy sector and the talk about pipelines? Is that why you weed people out who might be, to your point, left of center and hardliners as far as climate ideology goes? Could the two be married in terms of connected, where you get rid of people who are going to be real sticks in the mud about policies related to the energy sector?
What's funny is that Joly is not someone who has pronounced on that as much as some of her colleagues. Is she more on the progressive left-wing side of the Liberal Party? Absolutely, but she's a Quebecer, so I think that goes without saying. I think that it is just that she is of that Trudeau ilk where, for lack of a better term, virtue signaling, posturing, these are more important than results. And if we believe the hype on Carney, he believes in results over posturing. So, look, she shows up to the meeting with the Swedes about the Gripen jet wearing military-style green outfits.
Yeah.
And look, I know some progressives are saying, oh, how dare you say that? Look, someone that wore that as a uniform, that's exactly what she was doing. She was wearing olive drab. That's what we call it in the Canadian Armed Forces. It's not green, it's olive drab. And she wore that and military-esque outfits to, oh, look, I'm here to buy fighter jets from the Swedes and we'll get 10,000 jobs. That's performative. It's not results-oriented. Carney doesn't want that. He also doesn't want someone who has leadership ambitions around. She was looking at running for the Liberal leadership when Trudeau resigned and then thought, well, nobody's going to win. This is what she told people. We're not going to win, so I'm not going to run this time. Which means, well, next time. Except the guy who did win the Liberal leadership won the election. And he doesn't want someone like that around him. Also, as I pointed out, not exactly the most competent minister. She was Minister of Heritage in 2017 for Canada's 150th, and she screwed up putting a skating rink on the front lawn of Parliament Hill.
Now, you say there could be political risks to Carney if this isn't done too well, if it's done in a rash manner or too quickly. How is that risk possible?
Well, look, he's in a minority situation. He can't afford to lose votes. So he's got to handle this properly. If he, you know, from what I'm told, the Liberals are looking to line up by-elections all at once for Wilkinson, Blair, Freeland, and now Joly. There could be others. I know they want to get rid of Stephen Guilbeault, the former environment minister, now in charge of what was called Heritage. I forget the name that they've given it now. Wilkinson's riding, as I said, it's been conservative in the past. It was at one point a Reform and Canadian Alliance riding. It's been blue more than it's been red over the last 30 years. Guilbeault's riding has been both Bloc and NDP prior to him running. So, they could lose a couple of these. Scarborough-Guildwood, if the Conservatives get their act together, could win that. So there is some risk. What does he really want? He wants a majority government. And if he puts all of these out and things aren't going well at the time of the election, well, then that could see him lose one or two of these. Now, I doubt he'd lose all of them, but he could lose a few of them. But let's say, hear me out, and they announce all of this just after the House rises for the Christmas break, the week of December 15th. He does a cabinet shuffle, drops some useless people like Lena Diab in immigration, or, shuffles Gary Ndesangri out of public safety into something he's more suited for. And then, these people all resign, and he calls the by-elections for late January, early February. Well, the NDP has no leader, and they have no money, so they're not going to be organized for a by-election. The Conservatives are completely focused on Pierre Poilievre's leadership review. So if the Liberals are smart, they get as many of these people to resign at once, call a by-election for the end of February or end of January, early February, and it's kind of like a sneak attack. Then you have a better chance of winning. These are the types of discussions that are happening on the Hill. I'm not endorsing these. I'm just telling you what's happening. This is kind of what they're looking at doing. And then there still are some Liberals that want to do a spring election, and if not spring, then fall, if they can get to use the old Parti Québécois term, the winning conditions.
Right. That was my next question, is speculation around an election next year and whether these moves are designed, and you've sort of touched on that, to position the party a little bit more towards the center, make it more moderate and broaden its appeal, presumably to people who might otherwise vote conservative. Is that what's going on here? Getting the party ready to fight an election?
I think so. And look, even if they're more left-wing people, bring in people who are still competent rather than people that are interested in showing you the right thing. I mean, one of the biggest problems with the Trudeau government is they didn't care about results. If you said the right thing about ending poverty, that was better than doing something that would lift people out of poverty. And there can be left-wing governments that are competent, that can get things done. And especially you look at, Prairie New Democrats that are very pragmatic, Roy Romano over the years, things like that. Wab Kinew right now, very popular. These sorts of leaders can do well. But for Trudeau, they didn't care about the results. They cared about the press release and the news conference and the announcement. And then they forgot that they ever said anything about whatever issue they were talking about. So Carney's looking for people that are going to come in and say, okay, how do I get results? How do I, deliver on something? Whether it is the whole issue of getting a pipeline to Tidewater, whether it is the issue of building up large-scale nuclear reactors or small modulars, building Canada's energy infrastructure. As much as I have skepticism, I do about how he's handling it, I do believe he wants to do something to improve the Canadian economy. I couldn't say that about Justin Trudeau. So he's looking for competent people to go in, and he wants to put his own stamp on the party. Will he be able to do it? Depends on who he can recruit. still in a minority situation. And Mark, you've been around politics a long time. If I come to you and I'm like, hey, Mark, I'd like you to run, we're in government. We can get you in cabinet. This would be great. And you're like, yeah, but you're in a minority and you're going to an election in 6 months. So why would I run? That's kind of the thing that he's in right now. So will he be able to recruit that top talent? That's that's a big question for him, and part of the risk that we were talking about earlier.
Well, maybe he wants people who are ideologically in sync with him. And if you are in sync with Carney and you believe in the kind of policies he wants to push, maybe you'd be more inclined to run. But I want to ask you about the "who cares" comment as well, because you've been writing about this as well.
Yeah.
A comment tossed off by Carney in response to a question about Trump and whether he'd been in contact with Trump. What do you make of that? I mean, sometimes, he says things that are tossed off, dismissed. It almost comes out of his mouth before he gets a chance to prevent it from doing so. And I think this was one of those times. You could sense that there's frustration there, and you really saw it with that reaction. And now here he is going off to DC next week for the FIFA thing. What can you
Yeah.
draw from this?
He's still not quite a politician. He's done better than I ever expected, Mark. As someone that covered him when he was the Bank of Canada governor, I thought, well, he's a bit wooden. He has trouble communicating sometimes. He's going to have trouble relating to the average person. He's done far better than I expected. Obviously, so he won the election. So, you've got to hand him that, whether you support him or not. You got to hand him that. He and his party won the election that the Liberals had no business winning, but he was able to pull it off. But he still gets those moments where he just sounds really annoyed, and especially with women reporters. With reporters in general, but with women reporters especially, and this was Ashley Burke from CBC, she was asking a very valid question. Is the president returning your calls or your texts? Are you talking to him? And then, the second part of her question was about, then which countries would you, draw a red line on doing business with? Well, he answered the second part at length and then didn't answer the first part. And so she yelled out, but what about talking to the president? And he not only said, who cares? But it was like the wave of the hand. Who cares? And he's waving his hand saying, who cares? It's a detail. It's a detail. Well, I'm sorry, I'm from Hamilton. You know who cares? People working at Stelco and DeFasco. You know who else cares? People working in Algoma at Algoma Steel in Sault Ste. Marie. People working at the pipe plant in Regina or the steel mill in Edmonton. People working at aluminum places. People working in auto parts. Any of these tariff impacted industries care deeply about this. So, look, he had some good wins on this trip. $70 billion Canadian, 50 billion US in promised investments from the UAE. There's not a lot of detail on there. We don't know what it's going to be, but the Emiratis have the money, so I'm not worried about something showing up. I mean, that's not a big investment for them. It's big for us. It's not for them. So yeah, something's going to show up, and if it's 25 billion US instead of 50 billion, well, we're still going to be happy. He negotiated that deal with India and Australia on things like critical minerals, providing energy. I hope that's LNG, but also small and large nuclear reactors. That's a good deal. So he had the good deal with the UAE, he had the good deal with India and Australia. And then he's asked about the US, which is still more than 70% of our exports. And he says, who cares? Well, that takes away from everything that he's just done before, because we're talking about who cares instead of his wins. It's a dumb own goal by Mark Carney. Is he trying to play hard to get with the Americans? I don't know. But if I'm a steel worker, if I'm an auto worker, if I'm an aluminum worker, I'm pissed off at the moment. And guess what? I have family in all of those areas. This is not going over well.
Being dismissive of women, that's a major red flag. I mean, they supported him massively. And we always hear about how Poilievre has a problem with women voters. And now we find out that maybe Mark Carney has an issue with female reporters and is dismissive of them a little bit. I mean, that could be a grenade. I mean,
it could be. And look, both of them can be dismissive of journalists. So what? Guess what? That's part of the job. I've been at this a long time. I've had lots of politicians, including Justin Trudeau, stare me down, talk down at me, be aggressive. This is just how the world works. But Carney has a specific issue with female reporters, be it Ashley Burke at CBC, Rosemary Barton. Look inside yourself, Rosemary.
Exactly.
Stephanie Levitz at the Globe and Mail. The woman that interviewed him at the Canadian Club recently, I believe her name's Amber Canwar. I apologize. I don't know her. If I got the name wrong, I apologize. He was dismissive of her. If you recall that conversation, she tried raising the issue of,
Yes.
well, the industry says there are problems with the regulatory environment. No, there's not. No. And he was very aggressive and dismissive. This is an ongoing thing. And if I'm one of his handlers, I'm in a bit of a panic in saying, how do I get the boss to change? Because all of these people, by the time you're at the age Mark Carney is, it's hard to get them to change.
Yeah.
It's hard to get any of us to change. But if you're one of his handlers, you're saying, if this keeps up, this becomes, as you said, a grenade. This becomes a major problem, and it will turn off voters if it continues.
Last question I want to ask you about the upcoming, assuming it happens, is an announcement regarding possible pipeline deal. And you've got EB out saying there is no deal, so why should I be threatened by any of that? Any thoughts about that as we head to Thursday and this apparent announcement?
Premier Smith's office isn't confirming or denying anything. Neither is Carney's PMO. I'm still being told by Smith's office that they're cautiously optimistic, that they are hopeful for good things. So, look, she's still being a good soldier. She's playing along. So is Scott Moe on the canola tariff. So he is clearly, unlike Trudeau, willing to give them something. I know some of their voters are very frustrated that they're saying anything nice about Mark Carney rather than just trying to put him in a headlock, give him noogies, and wait for him to cry uncle. But these are serious issues for the respective economies of Alberta and Saskatchewan, and they've got to take these issues seriously. Sounds like there's going to be something. The question is, how many caveats are on it, Mark? Does Danielle Smith have to go out and do the work to get BC and the various First Nations groups on board, or does she have a partner in the federal government whose responsibility it is to do this? So is it, well, if you can go out and sell it, we'll give you the commission later after we take our cut, or is it, yes, we're partners? That's a big part that we don't know at this point.
Brian Lilley, the Toronto Sun. How do people find you?
Just brianlilley.com, torontosun.com. Check it out. You can find me on social media. I am ubiquitous.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that is it for this edition of Straight Up. Appreciate you tuning in, my friends. Let's do it again soon, shall we? Bye-bye for now.